Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. Wasn't it a great day yesterday? My goodness. I still have a little bit of influence in this part of the world, and I was able to arrange a perfect weather day for us as we went through the canal. You did need to have the experience of a little bit of the tropical rain, just enough to give you an idea of what it's like. And then in terms of the temperature, that was the mildest transit I've ever had. So we really didn't get too hot. It was just so special. I walked around the ship all day long meeting people, and I'm so glad I had a chance to talk to many of you. And I hope before the end of this cruise that my wife and I will be able to meet all of you at some point during the cruise. Several people indicated that they had checked something off their bucket list yesterday. And I think that was true for a lot of us. It's a very special experience to go through the canal. And I noticed one woman at the very front of the ship waving her umbrella in front of the ship. She actually was able to make it happen. Next to her was an individual with a smartphone, and there she was, a picture of her and her umbrella, just as we were going through Miraflores locks. So what a neat experience that must have been for her. Just a little bit of shop here, a little bit of cleaning up. I am very fortunate in that for 40 plus years I've had a wonderful woman, my wife Marianne, who not only goes like this when I have 5 minutes left, but she also tells me where I need to be and when I need to be there, and when I'm wrong. Doesn't every man need somebody who tells them when they're wrong? Okay, just a little catch-up here then. We've gone through 2 lectures, and let me get my glasses on, and I will do a little humble apologizing here. Number one, I did say at one point, and some of you probably noticed this, I said John Wallace when I meant John Stevens. I was talking about the chief engineers. The Camino Real, I said that was a paved path. It was paved with river stones. So if you had this vision of concrete and asphalt, wasn't that way at all. McCullough wrote biographies not of Teddy Roosevelt, but of Harry Truman and John Adams. So I stand corrected there. I think I said the Mexican-American War when I meant the Spanish-American War at some point. So, hey, look, when you get to be my age, there's a little bit of a disconnect between that and that. And my mouth is becoming more and more independent with every passing year. So it's not my fault. It's just one of those things that comes along with as the years pass. I think maybe some of you may be able to relate to that. Well, today I'm going to tell you about a very, very special country, Costa Rica. I have traveled through this country 5 or 6 times. 3 of them were extended visits. And there are some things that really make Costa Rica stand out, not only in Latin America, but the world as well. And so I think this is going to be a different kind of a destination lecture for you. I will tell you about some of the fun things to do, but you're going to learn a lot about Costa Rica that I hope you will remember. First of all, in terms of international rankings, take a look at this for a moment. The Happy Planet Index, that's a survey of subjective happiness and satisfaction, life expectancy at birth, that kind of thing. Number 1 in the world out of 151 countries, and of course number 1 in Latin America. Environmental performance, a number of different measures of the policies of government relating to environment, how well they're doing. Number 1 in Latin America, number 3 out of 163 in the world. Press freedom, number 1 in Latin America. Democracy, number 2 in Latin America. And world's best countries, I'm not sure what the criteria were, but number 2 out of, 2 in Latin America and 35 in the world out of 100 different countries. So Costa Rica is a very, very different kind of a country in many respects. Discovered first by Christopher Columbus on his fourth voyage. He was sailing down the coast. A little bit later in his journey, he found the Chagres River in Panama, as I mentioned the other day. But he came to Costa Rica, to this island that's just off the coast of Puerto Limon, which is the largest city on the Caribbean coast. And he landed there. And this is the kind of conversation that I think took place in the homes of the Indians in that area. Say, did you see those new neighbors who just sailed into the harbor? Let's go down and meet them. And this is the wife talking. And I think I'll put on all of the jewels that I have, all of the pearl necklace and everything, and really dress up so that I can impress these new people. Well, Columbus was so impressed that he called this new land Costa Rica, which means rich coast. Little did he realize that those were all of the jewels in the country right there. There were nothing else, unlike Peru and Mexico and some of the other countries that had a lot of mineral wealth. Costa Rica really didn't have anything of that nature. So the name Costa Rica is a little bit of a misnomer. But nonetheless, it was another 60 years before the Spaniards came into that part of the world. They traveled down from the main capital of Antigua, Guatemala. We will all be in Guatemala in just a few days, and many of you will be taking a tour to this city. This was the colonial capital of Costa Rica, even though it was located 500 miles to the north. Now, that kind of isolation has its pros and it has its cons. On the positive side, they were a backwater, and consequently, they didn't have a lot of intervention, a lot of meddling, micromanaging from the Spanish colonial bureaucracy, because after all, they were 500 miles away, and so they sort of developed in isolation from most of the Spanish colonies. Now, on a negative note, they were very poor. Because they were at the far end of the territory, so to speak, they didn't get any of the special programs, the investment that was spent on locations that were much closer to the center of power, such as Antigua. In fact, Costa Rica was described by a Spanish governor of Costa Rica as the poorest and most miserable Spanish colony in all of the Americas. In fact, that governor who said that, he didn't even have enough food to eat. From the Spanish headquarters, he had to grow his own food in order to survive. So Costa Rica was very, very isolated from most of the Spanish settlements. Now, just a little bit of Spanish colonial history. The Spanish crown divided up the new territories, gave land to the conquistadors, the explorers, administrators, friends of the royal family, and so forth. And so large tracts of land were given to those who had found favor with the Spanish crown. Those were called encomiendas. And part of the encomienda system was that all of the indigenous people who lived on that land were the ward of the owner of the land. In other words, he was the godfather, he was the overseer, and in some cases, he was the slave master. They had to work for him, and he had a responsibility to take care of them as a father would a child. Well, of course, that didn't work very well sometimes. And consequently, in many parts of Latin America, the culture, the economy was very much different than it ended up being in Costa Rica, because in Costa Rica, there were not many indigenous people to work the land. And so therefore, it didn't make any sense to have large tracts of land. And the land was broken up into much smaller quantities. And in fact, today, 50% of the farms are less than 25 acres. Now, if you think about it for a minute, that kind of wealth distribution in a society has important ramifications for the culture, for the politics. It's a much more egalitarian kind of a situation, much different than most of the Spanish colonies. just because of the fact that there weren't that many indigenous peoples in Costa Rica. Now, another remarkable feature of Costa Rica is 60 plus years of continuous democratic government, the longest in all of Latin America. 60 plus years, 11 presidential elections where power was turned over in a peaceful way. This is not the history of most of Latin America, but it's unique to Costa Rica. Don Pepe Figueres Ferrer was the individual who set that up. He led a rebellion in 1948 that overthrew an individual who was trying to stay in office. He hadn't won the election, but nonetheless he was going to ignore the election results. Don Pepe led a group of individuals who threw him out. And he was a very democratically oriented individual. He made sure that there was a new constitution that gave women and blacks the right to vote for the first time, that called for universal education for everyone, regardless of their economic class. For term limitations, every president could only serve for 4 years and could not run for office again. And he set the example by being the first president to serve and leave office. And also, very importantly, he abolished the army. And so it is, another unique factor of Costa Rica is it's the only country in all of the Western Hemisphere that does not have a standing army. They have a police group, as you can see here, but they do not have a navy, they don't have an air force or an army. Now that, if you think about it in terms of the amount of the gross domestic product that is spent on defense by most countries, that makes a lot of money available for other things. And excellent health care and sanitation is one of the beneficial side effects of having the money available that would have been spent on the armed forces. By the way, Tico is the term that Costa Ricans refer to each other as. They're Ticos. And 97% of them have access to excellent health care. 94% to treated water, 97% to sanitation. And a lot of individuals from Canada, from Great Britain, from Europe, from the United States have retired to Costa Rica because all of that is available to expatriates who move there. And I've talked to individuals who live in Costa Rica, and they have a first-rate healthcare system. So this is a major differentiating factor that Costa Rica is different from other countries. 96.3% literacy rate. 6% of their gross domestic product is devoted to education, 5.4% in the United States. I think that 6.4, or rather that 6%, is exceeded by Canada. I believe that Canadians spend more than that on education. So that's a remarkable thing. Very, very high literacy rate. And again, that supports a more egalitarian democratic society when people are educated and when they have the right to vote. Costa Rica is a unique country in terms of its topography as well. You'll notice the Cordillera de Talamanca running down the sort of towards the lower right part of the map. That is the major mountain chain that runs through Costa Rica. San Jose, the capital, is denoted by the star there. And more than, I think something like 60% of the people live in the valleys next to San Jose. And then the rest are, of course, sprinkled throughout the country. But because of all of the elevation changes, because of all of the mountains throughout the country, there are 12 different climate zones. The climate zone is driven by the elevation where that climate zone is located. And by the way, Costa Rica is 8 degrees north of the equator. Therefore, it would naturally have a very tropical kind of a climate, kind of an environment. But with all of that elevation, there's a great deal of variability throughout the country. Speaking of climate, you can take a look at these charts. You'll notice we have Fahrenheit on the left, centigrade on the right there in the top. Very, very narrow range of temperatures, just like in Panama. But unlike Panama, it's somewhat cooler than the chart that I showed you for Panama. At the bottom, the rainfall chart. Again, they have a distinct rainy season, which they call the invierno, which in Spanish means winter. It extends from approximately May through November, and then comes verano, which is summer, from December through April. So there's a great deal of variability. And it looks like we're getting in there just in time. We're not going to hopefully see a lot of rain tomorrow when we dock in Costa Rica. Renewable energy is another major differentiating factor for Costa Rica. And I need to update this slide because I was just reading last week that Costa Rica is the first country in the 21st century to generate 100% of its electricity from renewable energy. No other country in the world is doing that today. For the first 3 months of this year, they did it. They became the first country. They were able to do that because apparently there was more rainfall than usual, and so they were able to generate a lot more hydroelectric power than they normally would. But they have wind farms in many places to pick up that kind of energy. And because of the fact that they are on the ring of fire, they have volcanoes. I'll talk about those in just a minute. But they can capture a lot of geothermal energy. So they are just way out there in front of everyone else in terms of renewable energy. And another thing that's really quite remarkable, right now, there are 4 or 5 countries in the world that are trying to become the first truly carbon neutral country in the world. Iceland, Sweden, New Zealand, I can't remember all of them, but the one that's out in front is Costa Rica, and they expect by 2021 to be carbon neutral. And what that means is their carbon emissions, the amount of carbon that they consume will equal or exceed their carbon emissions. And so they're way out in front on that very important environmental measure as well. Now, this is a picture. If you get off the main highway, folks, I hope the vehicle has good springs, because this is a picture that my wife took of a road that we were traveling on in the interior of Costa Rica. And, you know, the bottom of those holes is pretty far down. In fact, once in a while you run into a problem of a significant nature. So they do, even though they're a very advanced country, by the way, we had a bad winter in Washington, D.C. area. And the street just down the way from where I live was sort of like that one, actually. They couldn't patch the potholes quick enough before new ones would open up. But at any rate, the roads of Costa Rica have a not good reputation. Volcanoes, I mentioned just a moment ago the Ring of Fire. Costa Rica is located on the Pacific rim where a lot of volcanoes are located. In fact, just a little bit more than a month ago, Turrialba volcano erupted, and this was a picture that was taken. I don't think any tours are going to Turrialba right now, so that's probably just as well because it's very, very active. You can see it in the middle of the map, fairly close to San Jose. But there are volcanoes all over the country. This is Arenal, which was sort of in the north. This is the way it looks today. In 2009, that is the way that it looked. My wife and I came through there, in fact, stayed nearby there during 2010, and it wasn't looking like this anymore, but at night, we parked the car beside the road one night, and we could see the lava flowing down the side of the volcanic crater. So it was very, very active at that point in time. The largest volcano in Costa Rica is Irasu. It's right next to San Jose, Costa Rica. And as you can see, it's a very, very large crater. It's very dormant today. But in 1964, I discovered that, in fact, it is a very true thing that God protects fools and little children. And I lump teenagers in the group of fools, okay? Because that's me standing next to Irasu in 1964. I was driving from Panama to Texas with a high school friend after we'd graduated from high school. And we stayed a couple of days in San Jose. And that was a very interesting experience. There were 2 inches of volcanic ash on the car every night when we would get up. Poas volcano. I noticed that there is an excursion to Poas. How many people are going to Poas? Anybody? Okay. Maybe just a few of you. Well, there it is. Isn't that impressive? Not. That is often the way it looks, but all you have to do is wait a minute. And just a few minutes later, these are pictures my wife took. 30 minutes later, you can see this very, very impressive crater. And by the way, Laguna Caliente at the bottom is the most acidic lake in the world. It is pure hydrosulfic acid. Nothing lives in that except some very, very minor life forms. Let's talk for just a minute about the economy and the agriculture and that kind of stuff. Coffee was introduced in Costa Rica in the early 19th century, and up until about 1950, it was the predominant crop of the entire country. They grew a fabulous, and still do, a very, very rich and robust kind of coffee. They grow it in the higher elevations, in the valleys that have a lot of rich volcanic soil in them. And so this is a picture of one of the locations that became known for coffee. But as time passed, other crops took its place. And these are pictures of a banana plantation near Puerto Limon that my wife took a few years back. As you can see on the apron of that individual, it says Del Monte. This was a Del Monte banana plantation. Very, very interesting. And my wife does all of the shopping for our family. I asked Marianne, where do the bananas come from that we buy here in the Washington, D.C. area? She said, all of them come from Costa Rica. And I think that's true of the entire eastern seaboard of the United States. Other parts of the world may get their bananas from other locations, such as Ecuador. But the eastern seaboard of the United States receives all of the bananas pretty much from Costa Rica. And that's number one, 100 million boxes annually. Pineapples. Del Monte introduced a new variety called the MD2 variety back in about 1980. And the pineapples are much smaller but very, very sweet. And I don't know if you bought a pineapple recently, but they are so much better than they used to be when we were somewhat younger. More than 80% of the pineapples sold in the United States come from Costa Rica. And then, of course, having these multiple climate zones, many of them being tropical in nature, they grow fruit all year long. That's a fruit stand that we took a picture of. And the fruit on the right is the cacao fruit. That's where chocolate comes from the beans that are in the center there. So it's a wonderful place to get fresh vegetables and fruit all year long. As we were driving through the country on our last trip, we saw this and we were wondering, what is going on? These fields are just covered with some kind of tarp or covering. What is that? And so we asked our guide and we found out that it was flowers that were being cultivated for the markets overseas. $100 million a year in flowers are exported from Costa Rica to places all over the world. And so many of the beautiful blooms in your local florist shops may well originate in Costa Rica. High technology, they do have a number of factories. Here's the Intel factory outside of San Jose. There are a number of other factories as well. But the big dollar earner is ecotourism. Costa Rica is visited by more people than any other country in Central America. 2 million visitors a year, $2 billion a year. And the income from ecotourism exceeds bananas, pineapples, all of the other vegetables and fruits and flowers and so forth that I've mentioned, coffee, it exceeds it by a great amount. There are so many fun things to do. Zip lining, which has become a very, very popular kind of recreational thing in many countries of the world, it originated in Costa Rica. In fact, my wife and I rode one of the first zip lines, I don't know how many years ago, but it was a wonderful experience. And of course, many of you are scheduled to take various tours, canopy tours. They have all kinds of experiences laid out in the shore excursions that are available to you. So you can see quite a few different things there. Birds. Those of you who enjoy birds, you're going to have a feast as you look around the country and you see the birds. Those two pictures on the left, we took out of the back porch of a place that we were staying in the country. And we put some watermelon rinds and papaya rinds and bananas and so forth there. And these two pictures on the left, there are probably about 10 different species of colorful birds. Those two pictures were taken only about 30 to 40 minutes apart. Many, many hummingbirds, too. Just very, very beautiful. So keep your eyes open. The birds are everywhere, and they are just fabulously beautiful. Another remarkable thing about Costa Rica, they have dedicated more of their land, a higher percentage of their land, for protection than any other country in the world. Can you imagine? 25% of the country is located in national parks, wildlife refuges, biological reserves, wetlands, and so forth. No development whatsoever takes place in them. In 2012, Costa Rica became the first country in the Western Hemisphere to ban recreational hunting. So they take their responsibility to preserve the heritage of their country very, very seriously. It's a very inspirational thing that they have chosen to do that. Now, I'm going to show you some of the major preserves and national parks, a couple or three of them, to just give you an idea of what they are like. Corcovado is located, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the map up there, the dark green, it's in the the southern eastern portion of the country. And National Geographic has called it the most biologically diverse or intense place in the world. It's just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. These are some of the different wildlife that live there. There's the alpha animal, the jaguar, and of course they reign supreme. On the right is a tapir, and then on the lower left, these little raccoon-like creatures are called quatimundi. And they sort of run in packs. And you might, as you're driving along, or maybe even at some of the places that you'll be going, they'll come up to you, and they have become very tame because people have fed them. So they're very, very cute little animals. And then in the far right there is a howler monkey. Somebody on the ship when we were near Gatun yesterday said, what kind of monkeys are there? And I said, well, there are capuchin monkeys. They have a white face, and they're sort of small and cute. And then there are howler monkeys. And he said, oh, good. I wish we could see some howler monkeys. Well, apparently there was a tree full of monkeys, somebody mentioned. I wish I'd seen that. But those of you who saw that were very fortunate. There are a lot of monkeys in Panama. There are a lot of howler monkeys in Panama as well as Costa Rica. I'll tell you just a short story. My wife and I were traveling with some of her family members, and my brother-in-law is only about 3 stages in evolution removed from our ancestors. I don't know, maybe some of you, I think I'm going to be in trouble. Marianne, I'm sorry. You know which brother I'm talking about. At any rate, howler monkeys, according to the Guinness Book of Records, can be heard 3 miles away. They are the loudest land animal in the Guinness Book of Records. And we could hear them off in the distance, howling. And my brother-in-law started making sounds like a monkey. Again, 3 steps removed. So, and then they started answering. And he'd howl a little bit, and they'd howl a little bit. And they were getting closer and closer. And, well, let me tell you quickly about howler monkeys have a potty sense of humor. You don't want them in the trees above you. Please move, unless you have an umbrella. And so they were coming closer and closer, and we left at that point in time. Would you like to hear what a howler monkey sounds like? Okay, I'm going to warn you right now. The loudest land animal in the world. So you may wish to hold your ears. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. All right, I'm going to have to learn how to use this new computer a little better. All right? So hold your ears. Let's see if it's going to work. I don't know. We weren't able to test that. All right, Oh, please, come on. All right. Tell you what, come to my next lecture. And we'll tell you I will do that for you. If you're here sitting in your seat at the beginning of the next lecture, you'll hear howler monkeys, and they do make a lot of noise. So let's keep moving. Tortuguero National Park is up in the upper northwestern part of Costa Rica, right on the coast. The only way to get there is to go by boat. There are no roads leading up there. It's a very isolated area with many different habitats, rainforests, swamps, beaches, lagoons, and so forth. I've not made it up there yet, but that's on my list of things to do the next time I go to Costa Rica. These are some of the wildlife that are there. Tortuga is Spanish for turtle. And so leatherback turtles, 7 feet in length, 2,000 pounds of weight, are found in Tortuguero National Park, and a number of other animals as well. It's just a remarkable variety of animals, fauna and flora, in that particular national park. Monteverde cloud forest. There are a number, this is the most famous one of all, but there are a number of cloud forests in Costa Rica. It's a unique environmental phenomenon. The forests are located, they're evergreen forests, located on the slopes of mountains next to the ocean. And fog comes off of the ocean and reaches those forests, and the water condenses on the leaves of the trees and drips down into the vegetation underneath the trees. It's a very unique ecological phenomenon. It doesn't rain from the sky, but it's condensation from the leaves. And as a result, there are some very unique forms of plants and animals that call cloud forests their home. Orchids in particular thrive in cloud forests. And if any of you will go on a cloud forest excursion, you'll see beautiful variety of orchids, I'm sure. Now, you're not going to see anybody going to market with one of these things. They haul their vegetables and produce and animals in the back of a pickup truck. But this is part of the culture of Costa Rica, and I realize I've got to have a picture of an ox cart. So you're going to see them at the various tourist locations that you go to. The patterns are unique to the regions where they were painted, they were built and painted. So there you go. There's my one ox cart picture for this slide presentation. But wooden products. I know many of you are planning on buying quite a few souvenirs as we progress through the various ports of Central America. Wood, if you want wood, this is the place. Costa Rica has so many varieties of hardwood, and they are so beautiful. As you can see, just absolutely magnificent works of art. They can be a little expensive, but if you enjoy that kind of art and you want to buy some for home, this is the place. Costa Rica is where you do want to buy your various wood carvings. Now, the term pura vida, there it is in the large print there, literally translated means the pure life, but it also connotes the good life, full of life, this is living, going great, cool, all of those kinds of things. It's really a mentality that is unique to Costa Rica. The people are just so laid back and so happy. And in fact, whenever you can really make a friend tomorrow, if you see a Costa Rican or a Tico, you can say pura vida, and they'll say pura vida back at you. It's sort of like aloha in Hawaii. It can be hello, it can be goodbye. But it's representative of the kind of people in Costa Rica. They're just a very happy, stress-free kind of folks. And speaking of the people of Costa Rica, another unique factor, the population of Costa Rica, a large percentage of them are second or third generation Europeans from Spain, Portugal, Ireland, England, France, Spain, Germany, Netherlands, Lebanon, many, many different countries of the world. It is truly a melting pot. And they have all learned how to live together in peace in this democratic society in Costa Rica. It's a wonderful, wonderful example for all of us. Now, it's sort of like many of our countries, perhaps. There's a gathering place for the senior citizens. At the end of the day, they sit around and they talk about they solve all of the problems of the world and have a good time. And so perhaps it's that same way in Costa Rica as well, in many places. Life expectancy. There was a book written several years ago about, I forget the name of it, the green zones or something like. There were about 5 places in the world where people lived a long, long time. And the Nicoya Peninsula, which is pretty much right where we'll be tomorrow, is one of the hot spots for longevity. The average life expectancy for Costa Rica is 79.3, second only to Canada in the Western Hemisphere. And of course, the United States is just a little bit less than that. So again, something about the climate, something about the culture, something about the way of life there that enables people to live happily for a long period of time. And the national dish, I got so sick of this food when I was there. I'm sorry, I'm going to be straight with you. Casado means married in Spanish. And I hope I haven't offended any Costa Ricans here today, but they have a dish called the casado. And look at all of the different ingredients. All of those are on your plate. And by the 4th day, I think I didn't want to ever see another casado again in my life. But it was really, really delicious until you'd seen it quite a bit. So I'm going to summarize here the presentation. Stable democratic government without a national army. The only one in the Western Hemisphere that doesn't have a national army. And by the way, my wife and I were there during the presidential election in 2010, and I speak Spanish, and I was able to listen to many of the advertisements on the radio and the television and see the ads up on the billboards and so forth. So I was able to see the way that they ran their presidential election. It was really very refreshing. Instead of attacking their opponent, his character, his integrity, and so on and so forth, they espoused what their program was, what they would do differently. And I thought, wouldn't that be a wonderful way for political campaigns to be run? Let's go back home and make it happen, folks. Okay, 100% renewable energy. We talked a lot about that, and the high literacy rate, excellent health and sanitation, the pura vida mentality, careful protection of a very beautiful, diverse environment. And as you visit Costa Rica, I give you a request. Leave nothing behind but footprints, kill nothing but time, and take nothing but memories. Take away nothing but memories. Thank you.